For Inside Carolina, I'm Taylor Vippolis, and you're listening to this podcast, which is a part of the Inside Carolina Podcast Network. So, first off, thank you for being here. If you haven't already subscribed to Inside Carolina, go ahead and do that wherever you get your podcast or on YouTube so you never miss any of the content our team at IC puts out. It hardly takes any time and it helps us out a lot. Also, speaking of support, we want to support the people that support us. So that's why on this podcast, I have to remind everybody about Jimmy's Famous Seafood. The reason they wanted to sponsor this podcast is simple. They're owned by UNC fans. With the pandemic and indoor dining restricted, it's currently a tough time to be a locally owned business. So it's helping out one of our own. And at the same time, you're getting ridiculously good seafood at a great price. It's a true win-win. For everybody wondering, my go-to order is the famous gift box where you get two massive crab cakes, two different kinds of crab soup, and then a half pint of crab dip. Visit them online at jimmysfamousseafood.com, and at checkout, use the code hashtag GDTBATH for free 2-day shipping. That's promo code hashtag GDTBATH. Joining me, as always, it's Carolina basketball legend Justin Jackson from the Oklahoma City Thunder. Justin, before we talk about UNC, NBA just came back from the All-Star break this weekend. You take on the Knicks. What was it like getting to see Reggie Bullock and Theo Pinson out there?
It was good to see him, man. Reggie played really well, and obviously Theo is Theo. So it was good to kind of catch up with you know with my roommate my freshman year, man, and kind of talk to him a little bit. So it was good to see him.
Since the last time we talked, Carolina beat Duke to close out the regular season. Then they blew out Notre Dame to start the ACC tournament. They beat a Virginia Tech team off a long rest, and then they finally lost in the ACC semifinals to a Florida State team. What were your biggest takeaways from watching Carolina in the ACC tournament?
Um, I think the Notre Dame game, um, Notre Dame was just kind of underhanded when it came to size and the ability to stop them inside. Obviously, you saw like Walker Kessler, the numbers he put up, and offensive reboundings, the crazy numbers they put up. I think they did exactly what they were supposed to do in that game. Virginia Tech, they went out there, obviously a little tougher game, but they went out there and they, um, I think did what they were supposed to do in that game. And then you go into the last game, and I think what's very not talked about is the fact that like conference tournaments, it's a game every single day, and they, I mean, they probably haven't played a back to back, let alone 3 games in a row, in a long time. And so going into that game against a Florida State team, which is a good team, I felt like they showed some fight, right? Like um, they really showed even when they were down, which is something that we've talked about all season, is like early on in the season when they got down, they stayed down. Like there wasn't ever really a run that made it seem like, okay, they might be able to come back but in that game, they really did fight and kept on pushing. I think some of it in the Florida State game, kind of watching it, there was just some decision making on the court that was at times kind of, I think kind of hurt them. But like I said, I think overall, I think they played a good tournament. Obviously, you can clean up some things, and in a loss, there's obviously things you can figure out. Okay, if we would have done this better, we could have won. But I think overall in the tournament, I think they played well, and I think they built some momentum to go into the tournament.
Yeah, going off that Walker Kessler point, you know Roy better than a lot of people. Walker Kessler had 16, 12, and 8. If Walker Kessler, when he's getting taken out of the game, goes to Roy and say, hey, try to get 2 more blocks to get this triple-double, what do you think Roy would have said to him?
There's no way. For one, there's no way that there's no player, I don't think, that would actually be bold enough to go and tell coach, hey, I need 2 more whatever stats to get this. I don't think any player would do that. But also, I think coach would look at him and be like, well, son, I think we're gonna go ahead and go sit down. Like I don't think that would ever, I don't think that would ever fly. So I'm glad he didn't do that.
Yeah, but going off the takeaways, my biggest point was that I saw a more consistent team for Carolina, where at times this year I've kind of been hit or miss on this North Carolina team, but the team I saw in the ACC tournament looked a lot better and a lot more consistent, where in the ACC tournament, they shoot 36.5% from three compared to 30.9% in the regular season. Also, in the ACC tournament, they averaged 11.3 turnovers, 20 a game over the last four regular season games. Did you see anything different from Carolina that led to better play, or do you think it was more that win or go home mindset that a tournament brings out?
To be honest, they just kind of looked more comfortable in themselves. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, I think, and the numbers show that. Like, shooting is all about rhythm and being comfortable when you go into a shot, right? Like, we saw Caleb knock down quite a few threes in the ACC tournament. RJ shot the ball really well. And obviously Kerwin, he's been shooting the ball well all season, but he shot the ball well. And it's like you kind of see them just kind of getting comfortable in, within the offense, and so I think that's kind of what comes with those numbers, as far as turnovers being lower and shooting percentage being higher. But also at the same time, like, the ACC tournament is totally different. Within the ACC conference play, like, if you lose a game, it's not necessarily the end of the world, but like if you lose a game in the tournament, like, you're out, so you do kind of have some more pressure that is kind of put on you and some urgency that you have to play with. So I think it's kind of a combination of both.
Yeah, I think the shooting was definitely encouraging to see guys like Caleb Love and RJ Davis step up because you know at this point what you're going to get with a guy like Kerwin Walton. And I think he was third in 3-point percentage behind those other two freshmen. So if Carolina could get that production in the NCAA tournament out of the backcourt shooting wise, it's got to figure to be good for Carolina. And one point that I wanted to make sure I asked you was Carolina was up late against Florida State, and then the offense kind of stuttered late. How does Carolina balance running traditional set plays and then running more of a freelance type offense?
Um, I think that the problem with um, like conference play and then obviously the conference tournament is like these teams have seen you run your plays like over and over again. Like they've had two games to scout against you in the regular season. And then you go into a conference play and they play you again and they're going over the same exact scout, the same plays. So I think a lot of times, like, what has to end up happening is you go into a more freelance offense. And I think, you know, within the game, you want to run your plays that you run secondary, all of those plays the coach has put in. But then whenever it gets to crunch time, like, then it's like, okay, you know what? Like, we just need a bucket. Like, it doesn't matter how we get it, doesn't matter what play we run. Like, we just need to get a bucket. And so then that's whenever it goes into freelance, and then you find guys that are playing well that game, or you find guys that okay, let's get somebody open to get some sort of shot, or let's get something to get, to drop it off to Armando down low or whatever. But I think honestly, it kind of goes like the team is really young still, like the team hasn't really been through that transition of like, okay, you know what, like these guys are really sitting on all of our secondary breaks and all the plays that we're running, like they're just, they're clogging it all up. So like, let's get into some sort of freelance to get somebody open. And I think they did a good job of offensively, like making plays and getting people involved. But I think it is kind of just getting to that point, and they're going to need in the tournament too, because I mean, these teams have, a week to scout against them or whatever. And so you just have to be ready to, okay, you know what, like Armando's dominating down low. Let's get him a touchdown low, like, and it's kind of a balance, but it's tough because they're still very young and the point guards are, pretty much both freshmen.
You had mentioned that Carolina was playing its third game in 3 days while Florida State was coming off a very rare triple bye. How real are tournament legs and fatigue when it comes to tournament play?
It's big. I think like all the years I was there, we always had basically the double bye. And so we never had to experience. So even then, it's like you still have to win 3 games in 3 days, let alone playing from the first day. You got to win 5 games in 5 days. That's actually crazy. So it is a real thing. It's very real. And, it's one of those things you can't really prepare for. Like, you can't get your body ready to play that many games, that much time, like in that little of, days. So like I said before, they've never played a back-to-back, right? Like the closest they got to that was back in high school, probably like in AAU, and those games are nothing like a college basketball game. And so it's like, going through that and then getting to that third game against a very good Florida State team, I think, that very easily could have been a problem, was fatigue. But, it's one of those things where you just got to push through it because that's kind of the cards you're dealt.
Also in that ACC semifinal, I never go into a game expecting a great performance from referees, but that game it was downright awful. As a team, when things are out of your control and they're not going your way, how do you kind of keep your composure to make sure the game doesn't spiral away from you?
Um, I mean, I think that's where the closeness of the team comes in at. And we talked about it before, but kind of those leaders that no matter what are able to keep the team together, have to step in, and so I think that's where those come into play, whether it's Garrison, whether it's Leaky, whether it's even like a play tech who's still a senior, or even if it is a freshman, if it is a Caleb Love or an RJ or Dayron or whatever, like, it's like those guys have to step up and be like, okay, you know what? Like the refs aren't here with us today and this isn't going our way, but we know who we are and we know that we're doing this for each other. So let's go out there and let's play for each other and let's do everything we can to try to win. So, hopefully that hopefully they've kind of found those guys who can step in during that time, because referees, you can't trust referees, man. You just can't. They're humans just like we are, and they're having to watch a game that goes extremely fast, so it's like you definitely cannot just hope that referees are going to be on your side or are going to be great that game. You just got to go out there and play for each other and try to do everything you can personally to try to win the game.
I forgot who said the quote from a coach that I talked with, and they said something like 99% of refs are good. I just happen to get the 1% every time.
I think that's everybody's mindset, honestly. That's literally everybody's mindset. So that's a great statement, but I think everybody deals with that 1%.
So with the ACC tournament behind us, next up came one of my favorite sports days, Selection Sunday. When you were at Carolina, what was a typical Selection Sunday like when you're all together anxiously waiting to see where you'll be and who you'll be playing?
It was always extremely exciting. It was a experience that, like, you know it doesn't seem that big, honestly, because it's like, okay, they're just picking teams to go into certain brackets, but like for you personally to be a part of that, it's kind of something that you didn't really know about, but like you've been waiting for your whole life. Like, okay, this is what we know. Like this, we always wanted to play in the NCAA tournament, and so being with everybody, being at, it's always over at coach's house every Sunday, every selection Sunday. So being over there and enjoying that time together was always something really special.
Yeah, I always love the live camera look-ins on Selection Sunday when the teams are going crazy. But when you do get to the NCAA tournament, is there anything different about practices or how you go about preparing for a game?
It's different because you've never seen those teams before, so like, you most of the time, like if you're going against Virginia within the season, how their defense is, the offense that they run, kind of the whole schemes that they do, but like you're going against a team that you've never seen, you never played against. They've got totally different players than you've played against all year. The style of play that they play is way, way different than, how the teams play in the ACC. So, it's one of those things where you really have to lock in a little bit more on personnel and kind of the plays that they run. And thankfully, like UNC has a great, all 3 years I was there, and even, years before that and years after, like the scout, like the walk-ons and everybody that runs the scout to get the team ready for the games, have always been really good. So like that's where they come into play. And so it's just really just trying to lock in and, try to be ready for a brand new opponent.
This is a team without a ton of tournament experience outside a player like Garrison Brooks. When you first went to the tournament your freshman year, what was that experience like?
It was crazy. I mean, and it's going to be different with them being in the bubble. I think that's another thing that's, going to be a little bit different. But it's one of those things where like you can't, the game of basketball is really simple. But like when you get to the tournament, having that feeling of like win and move on or lose and go home, like it's a totally different feeling than any other game of basketball that you've played. And so, I think that's where kind of what we talked about, like them coming out from the jump has to be a real thing, because it's not one of those things where it's like, if we lose this game, it's like, all right, we're just going to regroup and, come back next game. Like, no, it's over with, so coming out with that sense of urgency from the jump is going to be really key for them.
You are one of the most successful players in Carolina postseason history. You have a 13-2 record, which is a 87 win percentage. It ties Ty Lawson and Wayne Ellington for the best tournament win percentage in Carolina history. What's the best advice you could give to this Carolina team as they get this tournament started?
I say, for one, enjoy it. Not many players, not many people are able to experience the NCAA tournament. So definitely enjoy it and have fun with the whole experience. And secondly, take it very serious, right? Like, honestly, tournaments, the NCAA tournament was one of the funnest and one of the most intense experiences that you'll have in basketball. Like I said, going back to, it's a win and move on or lose and go home, and something as small as seeing coach right up there 32 teams or right up there 16 teams, like that really gets you excited and gets you motivated, so take it and enjoy it. But when it's time to go play, that's all that matters. Like your individual stats doesn't matter. Like what you feel like should be going on doesn't matter. Like the whole goal is just to go out there and win. And, if they can do that, I think they could definitely surprise a lot of people.
Carolina plays Wisconsin on Friday, one of only two teams that ever knocked you out of the NCAA tournament. Stylistically, these are two teams on complete opposite ends of the tempo and the pace spectrum. How much does it help that Carolina does have experience against a team like Virginia, who plays a similar way to a team like Wisconsin and maybe even does it a little better than Wisconsin tries to do?
Yeah, I think it's that definitely helps as far as like being able to change play style. I think at the same time, like Virginia, in my personal opinion, is totally, it's like an outlier. The way they play defense to slow down the game, offensively, they play really, really slow. So I think even against like a Wisconsin team who tries to slow the tempo and tries to slow the game down and reduce the amount of possessions, I think Carolina can still play their same way as far as trying to get out in transition as much as possible, offensively pushing the pace, and defensively, trying to get into passing lanes. I think going against a team that's, doesn't necessarily play the same style of defense as Virginia does, but still wants to slow it down, you can still take advantage of times in transition and things like that. So I think for them, it's going out there and still playing their same style, right? Like at times you're going to have to kind of change up and you're going to have to score in the half court by grinding out the shot clock and stuff like that, but still trying to play the same style of play, whether that's getting out of transition, pushing the pace, pounding it inside, trying to play the same way you've played all year. And, I think that's where they'll have the most success.
These two teams, like I mentioned, couldn't be further apart. Where additionally, Wisconsin starts 4 seniors and they have 2 more in its 8-man rotation. We know how much experience helps in tournaments, but what do you think Carolina can do to try to counter that advantage with its young team?
Um, I think it's just a matter of using their energy, honestly. Like, it's tough, because experience is a real thing when it comes to a tournament, like just a matter of just being in a tournament game before you go into the next one feeling more comfortable. But at the same time, like these guys not many guys have played in the tournament on the team. So it's like, they're kind of going out there like a fresh new scene. Like, and so I think for them, it's going out there and just going 100%, right? Like, and just going out there and just trying to do everything that they can to try to win. And, if they can do that, I think they'll kind of negate some of the age. I think skill sets are obviously different, from the Wisconsin team to our team. And so, like I said, just going out there and playing how they play, and not trying to change up. I think whenever you start trying to change up and trying to do different things than you have been doing all year, that's when you can get into some trouble. So I think it's just going out there and playing how Carolina plays. And I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, despite the age, Carolina should have a major advantage with its front court. Carolina is the number one rebounding margin and the number one offensive rebounding percentage team in the country, whereas Wisconsin is 240th with actually a negative rebounding margin. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on when this game tips off. And I've seen the fans for Carolina kind of making the mistake already of looking ahead in the bracket to a potential Baylor matchup. But let's say Carolina does win on Friday. What is that first weekend turnaround like where you then do have to prepare for another team in a short time frame?
Um, I mean, once again, it's totally different than what they've experienced because, like against that Wisconsin team, you have this whole week to prepare. You know, like you have this whole week to go over their scout, to go over personnel, go over their plays, but then you have to quickly turn around and scout a whole new team that you haven't seen all year again. You know, unless you've watched their games on TV or whatever. And so I think that's where kind of just being locked into whenever the coaches are telling you what this person does or what this team likes to do, like the sense of urgency with that has to go up a whole new level than what it has all season. um, let alone against like you said, we're not going to look forward, but let alone against a very, very good Baylor team. So you have to be really, really locked in to um, what needs to be done within that next game. So, like you said, we'll take Wisconsin first, but their mentality has to be, okay, whatever we have to do, whether it's okay against Wisconsin, we got to try to figure out how to go against a slower pace. Okay, we beat them. Now what does Baylor do? Like it's a day-to-day mindset that they have to be in, to try to make it to the tournament.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that Carolina played its way into the 8-9 matchup where this year it feels like there's as big a gap as ever before between the one line and the next line. So in a way, Carolina kind of hurt itself playing so well in the ACC tournament where if they do beat Wisconsin, they get a Baylor team in the second round. But first, Carolina, like we mentioned, has to get past Wisconsin where Roy Williams enters 29-0 in first round matchups. And this is the third time Roy enters the NCAA tournament as an 8 seed. He won in 2000 at Kansas against number 9 DePaul. And in 2013, his Tar Heels beat number 9 Villanova. Tip off on Friday against the Badgers at 7:10 p.m. Eastern. We'll see if the streak lives on. Justin, thanks for the time today, as always.
I appreciate you, man.